Hi, welcome this afternoon. It's another stuffy day in my studio. I don't know if I'll find a solution to solve the heat. Maybe not focus on it. After my last episode, the universe taketh and giveth. Security, a feeling of security, came center stage, and it seemed obvious to me that my next presentation, my next show should deal more with security. I mentioned that the fairer sex, the smarter, the superior in every possible way, the females that grace us with our presence and walk with us through this journey, making it infinitely better. I mentioned that at times they turn to us for security, for a sense of security. And the funny thing is, they're smart enough, they know that there really isn't security in this world. Life simply isn't secure. It's subject to change, instantaneous change. Something could happen the next moment that will forever change the trajectory of this lifetime. But they know when to play the game much better than we men know. And part of the game that they want to entertain is the veneer, the veil, the illusion of security can exist, and they look to us to supply them. So the conundrum is for me what to do when I know all these things I just stated. How can I help? I mentioned last time in my wonderful, beautiful, intelligent, incredibly insightful wife, my fellow traveler, was terrified of the recent earthquake in Wellman. But I also was quick to point out her bravery. She never once complained. She accepted it in stride, overcoming her immediate terror and her inherent understanding that events sometimes spiral completely out of our control. And it just made me so happy to have her with me on this journey. And because she came to me later in life, because we met and got together, basically in my twilight. It's more like dawn for her, but that's another story. But I had, previous to meeting her, if you would have asked me, would I marry again? I've been divorced, happily divorced, for 33 years. And the idea of marrying again was the farthest thing from my mind. But it happened. But previous to this event happening in my life, I was given a glimpse of understanding, a little insight that I get from time to time. And I was seeing that the spiritual nature of the teachers, the leaders, the ones we look to for guidance, has undergone an incredible transformation. No longer is it the single male presence. It has evolved into coupling of the yin and the yang. It has progressed to the point that as we move forward, Buddhas will be married. Potential Buddhas will find solace, comfort, companionship, and a myriad of other advantages that come from the fair sex. So I saw this happening before it happened to me. And actually, my wife had been enlightened many years before me. When she was only 19 or 20, I had to wait till 66. But it's something that she doesn't want to talk about because it was traumatizing. And she didn't have the sophistication, the understanding of what had happened to her. And she could only view it from the context of her experience. And her experience didn't include awakening, the awakening process. And the trauma that comes sometimes can be associated with it. I can't say that personally I experienced much trauma, although it was a shattering experience. I didn't have much vested in my ego, so there wasn't, the transformation wasn't something that I couldn't readily handle. But in her case, in many ways at 19 and 20, our egos are kind of like jello, you know, they're needing to firm up. And can you imagine the trauma involved? It manifested, to her understanding, it was panic attacks. So she continued over the years to look for something solid, that could comfort her. Security, if you will. And I think she was quick to see that any illusions she had of security coming from me were indeed illusory. But she's prepared, she can accept that. As we head into the unknown together, it's my hopes. There I use that hope word. Get rid of that. What verb could I use? I'll work on that one, okay? But as we move forward into the future, I see us more closely aligned in the work that we're doing, and that there be more and more couple participation. But unto the season, right? A time and place. And the time's not right. But I know that she's quite proud of what I'm doing with these videos. She appreciates my efforts. But still, I can feel her looking to me to be more successful financially. I'm the kind of guy that financially, I've never really worried about it. I always get by. There's always enough. I never accumulate a surplus, but I've never really felt the lack. I trust the universe to provide. And for her, that's a work in progress. Especially as I've retired and we're living on a smaller income. But personally for me, I've never felt that security was even possible, due to my understanding of what I observed in the workings of life. But something took away the anxiety that I had experienced, if I did indeed experience any. As I had written it off to just being a lucky guy that somehow worldly needs were always met. As I sit speaking to you, I have no debt. I have a small savings. I have a small retirement monies monthly. So I'm okay. We're okay. I've always been okay. But as we age, there's something that's staring us in the face. That there's actually no hope of security. Security in the sense that it will prevent something from happening. That's death. And I mentioned in the last video that I want to die well. My personal experience with this was my mother. None of us could be with her in her last moments. We had been told that she was getting better and not to worry and to rest. I was in Taiwan, she was in California, but my brother was pretty much sent home and got some rest, and Mom's okay, she's out of the woods. Well, she took a turn for the worse. And the little nurse that, God, I love nurses. They're our blessing. Thank you, all of you, for that work that you do. That's selfless. Talk about selfless giving. Underappreciated. Hug a nurse for me, would you? If one's in your life, bless her. Appreciate her. Well, the nurse told him the next day that my mom went out kicking and screaming. She did not want to let go. And this is what prompted me to decide that I wanted to die well. And when I mentioned that to a few friends, they had the most peculiar look on their face. It's quite an odd thing, especially in Taiwan society, because death is just not spoken of. It's such an intrinsic, big fear, which again, there's no security in the world. We will all die. We will all go through the final transformation as this physical form will experience. And we leave behind. Essentially, we step out of the shell and everything associated with the shell. So it's almost unrecognizable to most of us, of ourselves, in the spiritual, the light body form. We would hardly be really challenged to recognize it as ourselves. Yet, this is our essential self. This is the timeless, the part of the universe that we all share. So when I mentioned to my friends, I would like to die well, they didn't really get it, and I didn't want to go through the story with my mom. But what I wasn't saying, which I was taking for granted, that more importantly than dying well, is living well. And I certainly made every effort to make this incarnation as meaningful, as useful, as I possibly could. Not a day goes by when I don't think of how I could be a better man. Not a day goes by that I don't evaluate the day. The difference for me is that I don't hang on to any baggage. I don't have any garbage. If I didn't do well today, if there's things that I could have done better, and trust me, we could always be better, couldn't we? Well, I'll review it. Honest self-inquiry. Take a hard look. And then pretty much shrug it off and say, oh well, I'll do better. I never beat myself up for shortcomings. They're past. They're gone. Where do they go? Yeah. They're gone. Can't get them back. Can't take your words back, spoken in anger, or worse yet, carelessness. Anger has its place. Carelessness simply doesn't. We must care. We must care and embrace every moment that we love live, love. Live, love, live. Yes, indeed. We must spread this through our friends, and we must always remember the universal equality, the sameness of one and all. We're of the same essence. We're Sangha in Hindu family. Yes, indeed. We should look out. We should look at all in the world as family. But on a personal note, I'm really working on expanding Donald Trump into my Sangha. It just sticks in my throat. But I'll get there. It's a work in progress. Just because I accept him doesn't mean I endorse, embrace, understand, support, like him. None of those things are necessary to include him in the family. Previous to Donald Trump, I have to tell you, Bill Gates occupied the same territory that Donald Trump does for me now. I saw him as the evil incarnate. But now he looks pretty tame, doesn't he? It's all in context, isn't it? It's all a matter of context. Yeah. Speaking of presidents, I was really disappointed in George W. Bush. I thought he left a lot to be desired. But man, he's looking pretty presidential these days to one and all. We look on his days with nostalgia. So increase your family, accept all of us. And be aware that more and more people are waking up. It's a sign of the times. We've reached the tipping point where there's no going back. Despite all the unpleasant things in the world around us, the pleasant news that I'd like to share is that more and more are awakening and remembering what they've always known. So your access to these people, I read Quora almost every day. I look on the internet to see what my friend Dennis Harris, to see what amazing pictures and words of wisdom that he's posted. I just appreciate his work so much. And there's many others out there. And luckily, or coincidentally, I think not, the internet and the way that we're all connected is part of this whole manifestation of evolution of humankind. So who needs security? Who needs a false sense of security in this reality, in this environment that more and more are waking up? But my fellow baby boomers, we've always been a novelty. Ooh, I stumbled on that word. I won't even try again. We're the big belly of the anaconda that's swallowed in the birth rates. There's just so many of us, and we're all at the same kind of crossroads. And maybe we'll bankrupt the system trying to take care of all of us old souls with Social Security. And before this bubble, before the anaconda swallowed and we're this large input of people, we're followed by a smaller amount of people who are burdened with supporting us. Quite a burden. The poor millennials, the generation that's coming of age, approaching 40s, definitely filling up the 30s. These guys, if I believed in such things, I would think they got the short end of the stick. But if security is indeed illusory, how do we deal with death as it comes closer and closer? Well, in the process of understanding, in the journey of no steps, as Christian Humphreys said, one of the first Western Buddhists, British guy, he had a great book, Walk On. And now I see this journey, because I like that word journey. I like another word, quest. It's exciting to be on a quest. But a journey of no steps, a journey that's going nowhere, which becomes now here. Nowhere, now here. Depending on you, how you divide your syllables. Now here is a handy little guide to come back, and the journey is here. So the journey from without to within, can you measure it? It's kind of a small leap, even though perspective, the change in perspective, may be huge. But in this process of self-inquiry, in this discovery of learning who we've always been, comes an understanding that we return to the source. Just as my favorite simile, metaphor, of drops of the ocean from a wave, and the drops returning back into the Mother Ocean, the wholeness. And I see that drop as our very short-lived experience, especially in the scheme of time, space-time I'm talking about, in the quantum physics sense, not linear time, as we've created ourselves. There's no clock ticking based on the rotation of the earth around the sun. There is a pattern, but we artificially enforced our cognitive need to measure. But as we experience this awakening, and indeed we all will experience it in the right time. When it happens, it's always the right time. I think it's kind of like childbirth. They say we were early, we were late. And I always thought, no, we were right on time. The universe's will that we take our first breath, that we cry our first for the first time. But in this journey, in this understanding that I mentioned earlier, that we're a brief blink of an eye from leaving the source to returning it. And if we're lucky enough on this trajectory to grasp where we're going, how can there be fear, I ask you? It's not a fear of unknown, which I think is probably the biggest fear about dying. What's going to happen after I die? Well, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It will happen as it should. It will be as it always has been and will be. But where is the insecurity? How can you feel insecure when you know that this trajectory, this brief flight through space-time, which is permeated with suffering, but suffering with a purpose. The purpose is for you to end the suffering. Isn't that interesting? The purpose of suffering is to learn how to end it. So this insecurity about death, the biggest fear, which anybody in their right mind would say that there's no security to be found in the reality of death. People have created all kinds of amazing, I'll go to heaven. Well, bless your soul. If that makes living your life easier now, more power to you. But how can we be afraid? How can we experience fear? And if we learn that we're eternal, we're in a constant state of evolution, that we're constantly getting better, expanding ourselves, joining together with the fabric of the universe. Where's the fear? And I believe that once you can rid yourself of this major fear, once that you are complete in your understanding of how the universe works, your role in it, is that security? Knowing these things, does that give you security? If that doesn't, nothing will. And I suspect that really nothing will. Because these questions become unnecessary. These questions derive from our deluded sense of individualized self. Once we're able to expand and accept, fear disappears, along with the concept of, and here I can use that word hope, the hope for security. All of that is rendered mute by the reality, the simple reality of what is so.